In this edition of I Escape, a gang of murderers gets loose on the streets of Miami.
These 5 individuals are extremely dangerous. We do not know where they are at this point in time.
And a bank-robbing bandit masterminds not only 1, but 2 escapes.
He set about doing exactly what he did in Fremantle, and that was living and breathing escape plans.
Around the world, there are over 9 million prisoners behind bars. These are the stories of the few who dared to break out. Florida, 1994, 75 miles northwest of Miami, is the Glades Correctional Institution. Built in the Florida cane fields, Glades is a giant razor wire cage housing 1,100 of the most brutal criminals in the country. 6 observation towers guard the perimeter, while 200 armed officers patrol the grounds.
This prison is a very tough place to get out or to attempt to make any escapes.
In December, 6 convicted killers are desperate to break out. Hector Rivas pushed a boat captain into the ocean and watched him drown. Florenzo Alvarez killed a roommate and then burned his body. Juan Freitas shot a teenager in the head 3 times during a botched home invasion.
All of the 6 had either used automatic weapons, silencers, and machine guns to kill their victims.
Armando Yanco used a machine gun to kill 2 fellow drug dealers ripping off 4,000 pounds of marijuana. Jesus Martinez gunned down a restaurant patron who chased him after an armed holdup. And Felix Carbonell murdered a man during a burglary.
A lot of them were in prison in Cuba. I know one of them told prison officials that he had been in prison for 20 years in Cuba before he came over to the United States.
The gang's leader, Hector Rivas, knows that there is no way through the deadly razor wire. It'll slice through sinew and muscle like a hot knife through butter. He calculates their best chance is to go under the razor wire. And the timing is the key.
They used the Christmas time area where they had singing and they had some activities at the chapel, at the church, inside the prison to plan their escape and to effectuate their escape.
For weeks, Rivas and his gang of killers steal items from around the prison. Spoons, clean clothes, a long piece of rope, and they start going to church.
The escapees were saying that they were attending church in the chapel.
The chapel is just yards from the perimeter fence.
In reality, they were going underneath the chapel, changing clothes and digging for periods of time.
With the sound of the Christmas choir practicing above obscuring their noise, the gang begins to tunnel toward the perimeter fence. Freedom is just 25 feet away. But as they began to dig, they learned that the prison security is being upgraded.
They had to hurry their digging so that they didn't have to dig another 20 or 30 feet and cross underneath a brand new fence that they were just about to put in.
As the gang digs, they need to make sure they are not buried alive.
It was real soft mud, but they could make a very hard wall and floor and ceiling to it, so it really didn't need a lot of wood or other engineering type stuff to make it safe for them to travel through.
However, the mud is a dead giveaway if a guard spots their dirty clothes.
They would come back out of the tunnel and put on fresh clothes and go back into the general population of the prison.
On January 2nd, after 3 weeks of digging, the Florida 6 make their move.
The escape occurred just after New Year's Eve. That was their chance. They had to do it while all the inmates were moving into this one particular area of the prison. The escapees were seen escaping, coming out of the tunnel by one of the corrections officers in a tower. That corrections officer fired either once or twice, but was unable to disable any of the escapees.
Now running free, their cunning escape plan takes a brutal twist.
They just made their way out. They went to several hundred yards to an awaiting vehicle where they proceeded to beat up one of the escapees, Felix Carbonell.
They beat Carbonell so badly he can't walk.
He was actually used as a guinea pig to slow the pursuing officers down so that the rest of them could get away.
The plan works as Carbonell waits helplessly for recapture. The other 5 race through the cane fields to a waiting car. A desperate gang of murderers is now loose on the streets of Miami. Miami, Florida, 1995. At the Glades prison, 75 miles north of Miami, 6 convicted murderers have just escaped by digging a 25-foot tunnel from the prison chapel.
We recaptured one inmate approximately 1/4 of a mile away from the institution. So right now we are believing that there are 5 inmates currently at large in the South Florida area.
There was a massive manhunt around the prison. Prison officials, officers, canine officers, members of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office and the City of Belle Glade all participated in trying to locate the fugitives. They, at that point, did not know that the fugitives had gotten a ride in a vehicle that would take them directly back to the Miami area.
As the gang arrive in downtown Miami, Juan Fleitas decides to go on his own.
Juan Fleitas made a phone call to a subject in Miami that said that he would help the escape. So he wanted to depart to try and beat the odds and leave the other group. The smaller the group, the less likely they are to be arrested.
Martinez, Rivas, Alvarez, and Yanko are dropped off on the outskirts of the city.
The remaining 4 escapees were taken to a squatters camp, an encampment west of town. It was very rural, very wooded area with small little camps, and they decided to remain there in the camp for a few days until the heat was off them.
We do not know where they are at this point in time. That is why we are absolutely desperate for help. As all of you know, these 5 individuals were convicted of first-degree murder. They are extremely dangerous.
Fearing a potential bloodbath, authorities place a $10,000 bounty on each escapee's head.
2 of them stayed at the camp. 2 of them got antsy and went into town. They were getting bored out at the camp and wanted some excitement.
Rivas and Martinez arrive in their old neighborhood of Little Havana. Meanwhile, the $10,000 reward pays off for the police.
2 homeless individuals went to a highway patrol station in Miami and told the officers there that they believed 2 of the escapees were living in the squatters camp.
More than 100 federal and state agents, along with local police, surround the camp.
Armando Junco actually attacked a task force member and attempted to secure the gun away from the officer, where the fight ensued and he was shot and killed.
Florenzo Alvarez gives up and begins his journey back to life in prison. The next day, Jesus Martinez is spotted in Little Havana.
We were in a marked police vehicle in the intersection of Southwest 8th Avenue and 6th Street in the Little Havana neighborhood, when we observed a suspect which became known to us as Jesus Martinez. He had no identification. We continued to ask him for his name, kept giving us the runaround. Subject had 2 tattoos. And that's when we started asking for more additional information on the radio while still being cautious, because the individual was in jail for murder.
As Martinez insists he's not the man they're looking for, Officer Elion becomes more suspicious.
That moment, yes, we did handcuff him, put him in the back seat of the police car, took him to the station where he still denied who he was. We were able to take him up to get his fingerprints matched, along with the fingerprint card for Jesus Martinez, who escaped from prison. And it was matched, and he finally admitted to us, all right, you got me, I had to try.
The next morning, Hector Rivas is also captured in Little Havana, leaving only Juan Fleitas still at large.
Flatus eluded his capture for over 2.5 years until he committed a home invasion robbery in Merida, Mexico, and he was captured by the Mexican police. We knew we had our man.
Despite attempts to extradite him back to Florida, Flatus remains behind bars in Mexico.
We desperately want to close this investigation, and it won't be closed until Juan Flatus is released from the Mexican prison and brought back to the state of Florida, where we can put him back into a prison here in Florida.
The rest of the gang received between 3 and 15 years on top of their original life sentences. Coming up next, a prison escapee crisscrosses the country doing what he does best, robbing banks. Fremantle, Western Australia, 1989. Fremantle Prison, built from solid limestone in 1849, was host to over 10,000 transported convicts during the 19th century. Little has changed since colonial times. It now serves as the state's top maximum security unit. Locked inside is a career criminal convicted of stealing $110,000 from a bank in an armed holdup. 27-year-old Brendan Abbott. Sentence, 12 years. Now in Fremantle Prison for the third time, Abbott received an extra 6 years on his sentence for being a ringleader in a 2-day prison riot. But he was planning a quicker exit.
Someone's offered him a brand new hacksaw blade and asked him if he had any use for it, and he, of course, had said yes.
Abbott hatches an escape plot with 2 fellow prisoners, William Monahan and Aaron Reynolds. Day after day, Monahan and Reynolds use the hacksaw blade on the bars in a prison workshop, while Abbott distracts the guards.
He would keep the officers occupied talking about various things while people were working for him in the storeroom.
Abbott also discovered that tucked away in the back of the tailor shop was some navy blue overall material, and he's casually asked his supervisor if he could perhaps show him how to make a set of overalls. Coincidentally, blue overalls is what the Metropolitan Security Unit, who patrolled the prison, also wore.
On November 24th, 1989, the bars are finally cut through. The gang must move immediately. They quickly put on their homemade overalls, climb out of the window, and onto the prison roof. They are now in full view of armed guards in the towers.
The officer on the number 4 gun tower, he actually did see them. He's seen them running, but with the uniforms on. He thought it was the MSU doing some training.
But to make it to freedom, the men must make a series of 9-foot jumps.
William Monahan unfortunately failed to make one of the jumps and went down between 2 buildings and was found in considerable pain by some prison officers a short while later.
Abbott and Reynolds climb over the final barbed wire fence to the last roof.
And then jumped from that roof to freedom, and then ran down to the main street of Fremantle and jumped on a bus. All their colleagues back in the tailor shop had kept working as though nothing had happened, and it was a good 40 minutes to 50 minutes before the escape was actually discovered.
On the run, Abbott starts taking photographs of their travels.
They had no idea the police would find the roll of film and it would make its way into the newspaper, and Abbott would end up being branded the postcard bandit.
After splitting the proceeds from several new robberies, the escapees go their separate ways. Reynolds returns to Perth and is arrested almost immediately. The postcard bandit, now a lone gun, keeps on moving.
In a nutshell, he enjoyed it. And it was done to precision. It was incredible what he achieved. Most times it would either be right on closing time in one of these banks, or it would be right on opening time.
He decided doing them in the city where he was based was probably not a good idea. So he would regularly travel to Adelaide, and there were a series of robberies over the next 3 years.
Hitting banks in almost every state, police have no idea Abbott's traveled east to Australia's holiday mecca, the Gold Coast. It wasn't long before police are tipped off and put his post office box under surveillance. The astute postcard bandit becomes suspicious and stops using it. But
he couldn't stop mail coming into that post box. One piece of mail that came in was a bill for a pager that his current girlfriend, Georgia, was using.
Police trace the number to a Gold Coast address and stake it out. On March 27, 1995, Abbott steps out his front door.
As he walked along the street, a plainclothes officer pulled out a pistol and stuck it in his face and told him to get on the ground. Abbott couldn't believe it.
Notorious bank robber Brendan James Abbott was recaptured at a Broadbeach home unit. Police say Abbott was armed with a loaded pistol but offered no resistance.
After spending 5.5 years on the run and stealing $5 million, Abbott is once again in prison. But the postcard bandit's days on the run aren't over. Queensland, Australia. After almost 6 years on the run, Brendan Abbott, a.k.a. the Postcard Bandit, has been arrested by Gold Coast police.
The Queensland authorities immediately put Abbott into solitary confinement because they believed him to be an extreme escape risk.
Given a 20-year sentence, Abbott is sent to the Sir David Longland Correctional Centre, Queensland's toughest maximum security prison, nicknamed the Killing Fields.
He set about doing exactly what he did in Fremantle, and that was living and breathing escape plans.
Calculating that a mass breakthrough will confuse authorities and give him the best chance of escape, Abbott recruits Jason Nixon, Andrew Jeffrey, Oliver Alensick, and Peter Sterling, 3 convicted killers and a rapist. Using a special diamond-crusted wire, all 5 men take turns cutting through the bars of their cells. And on November 6th, while the prison is understaffed, Abbott gives the breakout the green light.
They did that by stacking up some chairs one on top of each other and jumping over it. They cleared the wire and then made it to the first of 3 outer fences.
And there were wire cutters thrown over the fence. There was a gun thrown over the fence.
And then when they started cutting that, they set off the first alarms in the prison control room.
Amazingly, the alarm is ignored while the escape is recorded on closed-circuit TV cameras.
These pictures reveal the apparent ease with which 5 dangerous inmates led by Brendan Abbott escaped from Sir David Longland Prison. They make short work of the first fence. Casually, they then decide where to attack the next fence.
Then the prison vehicle, who was patrolling the outer perimeter, realised something was going on and arrived on the scene.
Abbott's getaway driver, Brendan Berishon, opens fire on the patrol, disabling their vehicle. The prison officers return fire.
They felt the bullets whizzing past their ears that night. They were absolutely terrified, and with good reason.
Nearly 4 minutes later, success. The 5 crawl through, the last caught briefly on the fence. Guys, get the car! Quickly!
Abbott and his gang scramble to the getaway car and vanish into the night.
It was a daring breakout. They cut their prison bars with diamond-encrusted angel wire before making their escape in this heavily armed getaway car. Telltale bloodstains indicate at least one of the fugitives is injured.
Abbott's first move is to split from his fellow escapees. As Nixon, Sterling, Jeffrey, and Alensick are recaptured over the next few weeks, police once again concentrate on Abbott and Berishon.
Oh, it was a massive manhunt. It was a national manhunt. It was on the front pages of every newspaper across the country.
Abbott and Berishon go back to doing what the Postcard Bandit does best: robbing banks in every state.
Police in Western Australia believe bandit Brendan Abbott may have masterminded the state's biggest bank heist after a Perth branch of the Commonwealth Bank was robbed of $450,000.
The escapee then hooks up with Michelle, a prostitute Berishon was fond of, and head to Alice Springs in Australia's red light district. But the town is on high alert. Police intercept a phone call from Michelle to a Darwin motel and set up surveillance. It's not long before Brendan Abbott walks into the motel.
They couldn't believe their luck, but at the same time, they really had to think as to how they were going to bring down the nation's most wanted man on the streets of Darwin without having some innocent civilians taken with him.
The man no jail has been able to hold, finally back in custody. Brendan James Abbott captured in Darwin overnight, carrying all the tools of his trade: 2 handguns, ammunition, police radio scanners, a stack of false identities, even wigs. He planned to be on the run much longer.
He definitely was in a state of shock because he certainly wasn't expected to be apprehended in Darwin.
But the 36-year-old bandit stayed calm, even joking with police.
One of his requests has been for us to retrieve his laundry in the dryer.
Banned from commercial airlines, Brendan Abbott was herded onto a police service jet. Uniformed officers at every corner, ensuring this time there'd be no escape.
Brendan Barishon, tracked from an address in Abbott's wallet, was quickly apprehended. For the escape, the postcard bandit was given an extra 39 years on his sentence.
As Abbott began the final leg of his journey back to jail, some were already saying a third escape won't be far from his mind.
Ruthless robber or lovable rogue? Unless he escapes again, Australia's most colourful criminal will be inside a cell for the rest of his life.